Hello, listeners, and welcome to the latest episode of the AdQuick Madvertising Podcast, a podcast that explores the intersection of technology, marketing, content, all of the things that you care about. Today, we have a special guest. We have Christina Garnett. She is the Chief Customer Officer at Pocket CCO. She has a long, varied background at HubSpot and a lot of other marketing and tech companies. She's contributed to every marketing and ad trade, and is like, if you don't know Christina in the industry before this call, many of you likely do, but please get to know her. She is great. Christina, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat.
Yeah, you're overdue to have as a guest on the show. And we were talking beforehand that you're one of the people that I've admired online, followed online, been like a fan of your thoughts and your career for a while. So it's cool we get to connect over, something like this. I hope we can also do this in person one day.
Oh, I love that. And I feel the same way. I've been a fan of yours forever. So I'm excited that you even asked.
So we're going to dive right in because there's a lot to your story before we get into your actual ideas in the industry, because I think both are pretty interesting. So you made a pretty big life jump recently. You took the leap from being at a big company, big profitable company, to striking out on your own. And I think you were pretty entrepreneurial before that, but it's still a big jump. So A, congrats. And then B, what made you decide to do this?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I was at HubSpot before. I was there for almost 3 years, and I was in charge of the advocacy program Hub Fans. And while I was there, I created other programs to really kind of facilitate and scale that movement, like the Inbound Correspondence Program, the After Hours Show with George B. Thomas. But what I found was I wanted more. And I wanted to be able to create impact on a level that I just wasn't able to there, but also at other companies as well. And so I really looked at, like, what do I really love doing? What do I want to do? What's the impact I want to create? What does that look like on a daily basis versus like quarter by quarter? And it became really clear that I wasn't looking for another job. I was looking for something for me to build. And so I left to build Pocket CCO.
And so for anyone who's maybe, we have a lot of people on the brand side listening, and I'm sure a lot of them have fantasized about doing what you're doing. And so you're kind of in a unique position because I think you did a lot of the legwork to do this just your whole career by building a reputation and network, and definitely going above and beyond someone who's just taking a 9-to-5 job. But could you maybe offer some thoughts as to what you did intentionally or otherwise that got you to the point that you could do your own thing for those who might daydream of such a move?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the thing that I hopefully have done successfully is that I have a very clear point of view online. If you follow me, whether I'm joking about like David Tennant or something in sci-fi, or I'm talking about marketing or advertising, I have a very clear perspective. Like, exactly where I'm coming from and what I think about things. And so I think that that's really helped me, because when I left, I didn't have anyone who was shocked. Instead, the messaging was, that sounds perfect for you. That absolutely makes sense. And so I think that goes a really long way, so that I think a lot of people mess up that messaging when they go independent. It's like, oh, you're doing freelance. And it's like, maybe not. But you have to really nail the messaging. And I think a lot of people, when they go independent, they're really good at taking care of other people, but not themselves. You need to treat yourself like a client. Like, what would you advise your client to do? Like, they need to have a website before they announce. They need to have certain campaign assets ready. They need to have the messaging make sense. They need to know what their ICP is and what their mission statement is. And like, you can't just say, I'm doing this. You need to say, like, I'm doing this for this group, and this is how I'm doing it. And a lot of people miss those key elements because they're so busy focusing on the launch instead of all the pieces that go into that launch. And they do it on their 9-to-5. They know there's like a day, like a run of show doc that has all those little elements that have to work out just right. But when it comes to themselves, they don't give themselves that same kind of level of support and work. And I think that you got to do that. And that's what I like painstakingly tried to make sure I did.
And did doing that sort of process-driven work, is that what gave you the confidence to actually go on your own. Because I think people cerebrally understand, but I think it's not lack of ability. I think it's lack of confidence.
I completely agree with that. I think for me, confidence was definitely a factor, because there definitely is this worry that you're going to leave this big company and you're going to just fall flat on your face. And then you're going to feel like I wasn't special. It was the company that I worked for that was special. And then it's kind of rubbed off on me, and that was all I had. And so there is that fear. There's absolutely that fear. But what I think you need to do is you need to come from a place of, what do I know I am really good at? Like, what do I know I can provide? And there's 3 questions for positioning that I've had a lot of people reach out to me to be like, hey, Christina, I want to do this. What's your advice? And I ask them 3 questions. Where's the hole in the market? How do you fill that hole? And why are you the perfect person to fill that hole? And it's that 3rd question is where you need to have that confidence, and you need to have that self-knowledge of, this is what I bring to the table. This is how I can be unique and different in my offering. Because more and more people are going to go independent this year. As long as these layoffs keep happening, people are either going to choose to be independent because they literally can't find work, or they're going to go independent because they've realized that that's not the game they want to play anymore. And either way, it becomes a red ocean very quickly. You have to go in understanding your specific, unique point of view, how that's going to make you special, and why that's going to make people pick you. And that comes down to confidence, like you said.
Totally. And so I have a little bit of a similar story in that I actually never intended to be at a big company, and ended up at Google for like 7 years. And actually a testament to Google to keep someone like who's a little bit of a contrarian and troublemaker for that long. But actually, when I left to go back to startup land, which is definitely still a step, even not as hard as what you're doing, like fully independent, right? I definitely for at least like a year or 2 after, like had like PTSD of like should I have done this? And then the second thing is the one thing that you don't realize, well, you realize it because you do a lot of independent work, but once you leave the big company, like you're leaving political problems for pure economic problems. Like those are really the 2 differences. And you might decide that the economic problems, I think the economic problems are actually harder. I think the political problems are more like tedious. And like you said, was this just me or the company? And if you do quit, you will find out very fast if, look, you're good in a boardroom. And that's not to say that's not a useful skill. There's a lot of need for that as well, versus am I scrappy enough to build a service business or a product business myself, or even with a smaller team, versus I'm joining the thing that's already wildly profitable. I'm at Procter and Gamble, and I'm gonna argue about button colors on a website or something like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you're definitely choosing. I think the other thing that you find too is that because we joke about like being a team of one in a company, but if you're independent, you are a team of one. You are the sales team, you are the marketing team, you are the one that's making your decks. And you can obviously, like, as you scale, you can decide to like add members to your team to like help you. But when you're going independent, it's you, it's all you. And so if you're feeling kind of burned out from being a team of one when you're in corporate, it's going to feel on a different level when you're independent. I will say though, it is incredibly rewarding because you're doing it for yourself. Like, it really is a labor of love until it's monetized, because you have to have that kind of zest for it. The other thing that's really interesting too is that which I really loved is you find out the people who genuinely are in your corner versus not. And I'm sure you had this too when you left Google. The people who wanted you because you were at Google disappeared. The people who wanted you for you stayed. Same thing with me. The people who wanted me for HubSpot, could not find them. They lost my email. They lost my phone number. But the people who genuinely liked me for me, they're still here. They're still there. And honestly, I love that clarity. I think that's a really important piece of clarity when you realize who was kind of in your circle for what they could get versus, oh, you can't give me that thing anymore, so I'm just going to kind of go away. It's very telling.
The people who bothered me at Google for like lost access to their Gmail account still bother me. So I don't know. You might not escape.
You can't lose them.
You're into online communities. Once you build an online community and have certain people, you can't get rid of them. That's okay.
That's okay. They can tag along.
So I want to talk a little bit more about what you're up to specifically. So I know what a FCMO is, a fractional CMO. A lot of people
Yeah.
listening to this know what that is. I think we've had one fractional CMO on in the past. A friend of mine, Eric Friedman, is a fractional COO. I think he's still doing that, fractional chief operating officer. But I've actually never heard of a fractional chief customer officer. So is it the same thing as that, just with a customer and community focus? Tell me, because I don't really know what that is. I know what you do. Like, I know what I could hire Christina to do, but like, tell me what the actual like shop is.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I'm one of the first fractional ones. So I don't think it's very shocking that you're like, I don't think I've seen this a lot. Basically, whenever I was at HubSpot, I had a lot of people who tried to poach me and were like, I just want you in my pocket. I just wish you were in my pocket and I could pull you out whenever I needed you, which is hence the name Pocket CCO. And then what wound up happening was a lot of the businesses that I would love to help and create impact for, they absolutely understand that they need a chief customer officer. They understand that the customer is important and they need to be able to advocate for them, make sure they're offering a strong customer experience, but they would never pick a CCO over a CMO. Or in this case, we even see CMOs being moved into chief operating officers, or we're having that completely scrapped for chief revenue officers because of the economic climate. And so what this is it's a perfect opportunity for startups and agencies who would never have a chief customer officer because they have so many other seats they'd rather fill, but they know that they need someone to stand up and be there for the customer. And so this offers them the opportunity to work with me where I'm able to stand that infrastructure up for them. Do you have an NPS? Do you have a CSAT? Do you have a customer effort score? How are you looking, engaging what the customer experience actually looks like? What are all the customer touch points? What are all the mile markers within those touch points where their journey with you actually deviates? I do a lot of game theory in my work where I'm trying to figure out what are all the different ways that your customers can go as they're talking to you. And then really kind of looking at and diagnosing what is a bad customer experience, good customer experience, and great customer experience looks like, and how can we get from good to great? Because I find very few companies are actually doing great. They're doing good enough, which is very different than great. And so chief customer officer, that's what they're going to do. And you see that in enterprise companies that have like a full board, that have like thousands of employees. They have chief customer officers. They get it. Smaller people need that too, but they can't have it be a full-time thing. And so that's why I was the marketer who didn't want to be a CMO. I was the marketer who that was never the end goal for me. And so I really kind of crafted, what do I want? And I wrote my dream job. I wrote my job description. Like, here's everything that I would want to have. Here's everything that I would want to do. And I put it into ChatGPT and I asked, what is the title for this person? And it said, that's a chief customer officer. And I was like, okay.
Very cool. And so I'll put you on the spot to let you sell this position better. No, because I think this is great and you're spot on. Large enterprises have this role fleshed out. Why would they do that? Because the customer is, super important. So for a startup, I think a lot of startups right now are like really good on the marketing and brand side, whether they're an e-commerce store or whether they're, one of these new AI companies. There's obviously wide range in between those things. But say you're talking to a team that's shit hot at the marketing stack, the full marketing stack, from email to ads to, some light social. And they're doing a great job on just the classic marketing thing. What are they missing that someone like you, could bring in to show them, hey, here are things you could do better with, your current customers?
Yeah. So the first thing I do is I do an audit and I look at every single thing that touches the customer and see where are you personalizing versus not? Where are you segmenting versus not? Where are you delaying? How are you doing these touch points? Is it all through email? Is it all through advertising? Is it through social? What does that look like? Are those experiences aligned? Does it feel like the same team is doing the social copy versus doing the email versus doing the ads? Does it feel like it's a part of the same experience? And then how are people touching them outside of marketing? Do they have a CSM? What does that relationship look like? And so what you're doing is, it's kind of the whole Lion King of whatever the sun touches is our kingdom. It's whatever the customer sees is my kingdom. I need to look at it to make sure how are you actually taking care of them? Or are you creating marketing assets that are checking boxes, which I find a lot of them they are. Or they're killing it on social, but then their email campaigns are boring and dry and you can't tell that it's the same voice, that it's the same point of view. And so looking at all of that to figure out what does today look like? And then where are the opportunities that you're missing? Maybe you're not personalizing. Maybe there's an ICP that you're kind of like shoving into your personas, but you haven't really personalized anything specifically for their use case. And then looking at your KPIs. I've created a CCO dashboard that breaks down all the different KPIs that customer success, customer support, that they can all look at in terms of how are we taking care of the customer experience and making sure that we retain them. And a lot of times, a lot of them, they don't even have any of that. They'll just say like, we look at our retention rate and that's it. Okay, well, that doesn't tell you the whole story. And that tells you really the tail end of their journey. That tells you whether or not they decided to stay, but that doesn't tell you what got them to that decision. And so I pass out the CCO dashboard and basically say, what are the KPIs you're currently measuring? Which ones could you measure with the data that you currently have, but you're not? And then see where the holes are and where the gaps are, and to really kind of figure out what data are we missing, what data can we get, and then how often are we talking to the customer beyond email and social? Are you doing one-on-one customer interviews like this? If so, and there's feedback, what does that feedback loop look like? Are you talking to your product team to make sure that they know about the latest patterns of, hey, we have 10% of our customer base wants this specific feature. Is that on the roadmap? If so, when's the ship? Like all those things. And so there's a lot of moving pieces, but it comes audit. What does today look like? What are the holes? What are the scaled opportunities? And then how can I work with basically the entire team to make sure that everyone understands what the voice of the customer is saying?
Totally makes sense. And I think you feel what you're doing is an interesting niche, right? Because you're at the intersection of customer service and marketing.
Yeah.
And some people have made the case all customer service is in essence marketing now, to the extent that not only is it helping the brand solidify their relationship with that user, they have a great experience. They're like, oh, I would definitely buy from this company again. I'd stay at their hotel again, whatnot. But now they can also share that experience socially. And of course, we all know on the marketing side, word of mouth marketing is the most powerful marketing, not marketing from, the Kardashians or influencers. I think that's a little bit of a bubble, but your actual network is not a bubble. They will listen to you. That's like the antithesis of a bubble. That's like the thing you're not going to be able to permeate as a company unless you're really excellent and, you activate your users. So I guess this leads into my next question. Historically, and you're friends with a lot of, community managers and social media managers in the industry. And I kind of feel bad for them because I feel like it gets delegated either to interns or very junior people. It's not taken seriously. And then at the same time, you see companies having, we've seen at least a decade of like just reputation management crisis that was created that could have easily been avoided if you just staffed that role correctly. That cost companies however much in reputation and dollars. So I guess what's your sentiment here? Has this improved within companies? Are they taking social more seriously? Is it something that's sort of stuck? What's your take on where we're at?
Yeah, I think that we've seen some progress, but not nearly enough. There's been a lot more vocal voices in the space talking about and really kind of advocating for social media managers and creators about the work that they do, the level of work that they do. And the fact is that the social's only seen as important when it needs to be important. When you want to go viral, when you want earned media, when you want to win, when you want to, especially if you're having like a PR crisis, you want to come off as squeaky clean as possible. You want the best and the brightest then, but to keep the lights on, which a lot of companies, they're keeping the lights on. They won't keep the lights on effort, and resources, but they want viral results. And so that's why I'm seeing a lot of companies, they're really doing a disservice to social because they're picking this unhinged approach. Well, if you just like put yourself on fire on social, you'll get tons of engagement and that'll make us go viral and it'll be great. Well, once again, it proves you don't understand social because you could have really great engagement on social, but no one converts. And so you have social that looks like it's working from the outside, but internally you're realizing that like that's not the messaging that you need to do. You're not speaking to your ICP. You might be getting tons of engagement, but those people are not paying you. They're not giving you any money. They're not converting. And then what happens is you celebrate that social team until it becomes too much of a cost center, and then you cut them significantly and say, well, like, it looked great, but you're not bringing in the revenue we need. And I think that there's a huge problem with that. And so I do think, though, that there is enough articles, there's enough LinkedIn posts, there's enough tweets talking about what social media managers are going through and how difficult it is. Like, I wrote a piece during the pandemic for the Next Web about how social media managers have to be plugged in. Like, we're literally paid to be chronically online and be able to tell you what the room is saying at any given moment. And during COVID, it was significantly worse because you're seeing the worst of humanity and the worst of everything in real time. And you can't look away, like, you literally can't unplug because it's a part of your job. You have to be able to tell the team, hey, we need to go dark. There's no way we can post this without coming across as tone deaf. And so I do think that there's this issue. We've not created a ladder for them. So we understand that social is a key part of what needs to be in marketing, but we have not created a ladder for growth there, because I think the people at the top, I don't think they want to understand it. I think there's enough articles, there's enough things, there's enough stuff in the atmosphere that you can read or watch that will tell you exactly what's going on with the people who are leading those groups and who are creating that content, and they're still not getting it, which shows to me, like, you don't want to get it, because we've told you, like, we've screamed it, we've yelled it, we've written it out, we've done all the things. So I do feel bad for them. I do think, though, that what's going to have to happen is they're going to have to make their own ladder. They're going to have to figure out, like, all right, and I've seen articles like the social media managers of today are the CMOs of tomorrow. Great, but build that ladder. What does that ladder actually look like? What are the skills that you have currently as a social media manager that you're going to need to play with and also build upon? What are you lacking that you're going to need to add in order to be the CMO of tomorrow? So even the CMO role is in this weird, chaotic spin. One week CMOs are dying, next week CMOs are back. It's chaotic.
Yeah, everything you say is symptomatic of, I actually think, a broken C-suite. My colleague Chris Gaddick and I have written and had podcasts on a lot of the ills in the C-suite and the CMO in particular. An under 2-year revolving door is clearly symptomatic of actually not just the CMO, but the CFO and CEO making poor decisions, of the same sort of rotating people that, go to Cannes and win awards for themselves, and then, come into a company, run their same playbook and are kind of checked out and not even accessible to their team, really. So we've had this discussion a lot of times. For the CMO in particular, I think, and for social media marketers, I also recommend working for a team that's like super internet savvy. Like, if you look at OpenAI, right? Like Sam Altman, it's tweeting like really social stuff from their company all the time. Like, even creating a little bit of mystery around, a lot of the technology, and is AGI here? And he's having fun with it. And I think when leadership is doing that, then the whole company bottom up is going to understand and appreciate your effort. So, like, you can love or you can hate Elon. We can have a discussion about that.
We would need like a 24-hour podcast.
But the point notwithstanding is, like, Elon actually understands social, and you can say, look, Elon does silly things that I don't agree with. Okay, hard to argue with that sometimes. But on the other hand, they've built Tesla through social media marketing. So if, I'm not saying your company needs to shitpost, and certainly find your own voice, but I think that there's enough teams that are doing this really well, where it's like, if your leadership doesn't get it and it isn't doing it super well, I think talented people should vote with their feet. And also, like you said, make your own path upward, document your success, show, look, my community is driving X% incremental revenue. I'm showing how this actually correlates to business outcomes and connects to them. And you can definitely make your own opportunity there. Do we want to talk a little bit about, I feel like there's a little bit of, you've seen, like, recently there were some people laid off from Google for bringing like super activist, personality to work, which obviously you're not there for that. I feel like some people also bring a little bit of personal bias when it comes to the online channels that they choose to market on, whether it's, I don't like X or Twitter because I don't like Elon, or I don't use Instagram because I don't like Zuck. I've seen a little bit of that, and it seems weird to me, because as a marketer and as a professional, you're supposed to sort of be like a little dispassionate. You're supposed to just look at numbers and be like, look, this isn't my fight. I'm just trying to build a community. I'm trying to market a brand. I don't know if you've seen any of that, but I think like some of those comments have been a little weird that I've seen from some people.
For me, I think this is a bigger issue. I think that's also symptomatic of something bigger in the marketing space, where we feel like we have to plant the flag for ourselves. And at the end of the day, especially if you're in corporate, if you're working for somebody else, you can absolutely have your point of view. You can have, like, if something is really, like, if something means a lot to you, you can stand on that, knowing that there might be consequences. But at the end of the day, and like whenever especially when I was at HubSpot, and I knew a lot of people were following me on social and seeing what I was putting out there, HubSpot social media, like, their guidelines are very fluid. Like, they're not going to tell you, like, Christina, we're going to censor you. Like, that was never what it was. However, I always tweeted from the guise of, if I'm going to post this could be a hill I die on. Is this worth dying on the hill? And if it was, I posted it, I tweeted it. But at the end of the day, especially as a marketer, it's not you that has to win. It's the brand. The brand has to win. I think that's the problem with CMOs, where they go in and they're like, I need something flashy and shiny because I'm only going to have 2 years here. So I'm going to rebrand the logo, and it's going to be in Helvetica. Like, all of that is so they can say that they did this one big rebrand. They did this one big thing, and then they get pushed out because they're like, 2-year window expired. Same thing. The brand has to win. It can't be because you need this shiny object to get passed through. It isn't because, like, if you do this, you're going to win an award. It has to be, if I do this, does this benefit the brand? And if it benefits the brand and I believe in it, let's go. If it benefits the brand, but I don't believe in it, I need to be able to be resound in my belief enough to say, if I wasn't who I was, if I'm completely unbiased, looking at this from the outside looking in, this is what I would do. However, I don't feel comfortable doing this because of da 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 da. And being very thoughtful, like, you can bring your character to work, but you have to acknowledge that character and what's better for the brand are not always going to be in alignment. And it's okay to say that out loud, depending on where you work. But saying, like, if I'm going to feel this way and I'm going to say this, there's going to be consequences. I've sat in meetings where I've said the quiet part out loud. I was like, I know every single person on this meeting is thinking what they're thinking, but I'm going to say it because I agree and I'm thinking the same thing. And I got looks and they're like, Christina, you can't say that. And I'm like, but that's what's happening. And you have to understand that, like, you're putting yourself out there, and that out there might give you a promotion because they see you as a leader. It might get you retaliation because they realize, like, ooh, we don't want someone who's going to say that out loud. We don't want someone who's going to pick a fight and fight for something that we all disagree on. And so it's a gamble, but honestly, that's what really good marketing is. Really good marketing is a gamble because you never know how it's going to land. You can do all of the risk assessment you want. You can do testing to minimize and see what's the worst case scenario. You can do game theory to see what are all the different ways that it could pan out. But at the end, and we see this, especially if you're on Twitter, you'll write something and be like, this is hilarious. This is funny. This is insightful. This is going to blow up, and it gets 2 likes. You post a picture of what you ate for lunch, it blows up. Makes no sense. But it's how it is. It's just the nature of the beast.
I liked what you said about, knowing what the right thing to say is. I actually subscribe to the philosophy of saying the right thing and waiting to get fired. And I've lived that, and it's actually gotten me in trouble. And I live with all those decisions. I think a really good example of that is this really only applies to big companies, because smaller companies, like, want you to be a maverick. Seriously, they want you to make noise.
Yeah, they need you to. Yeah.
Otherwise, you're ignored, and then you're basically dead. But I got my wrist slapped at Google because I'm good friends with Danny Sullivan, and he texted me and he's like, hey, I'm near Mountain View. You want to grab lunch? And I'm like, yeah, of course. And Google had some weird policy, like, you can't bring in a journalist without the PR team's approval. But honestly, I've done PR like for my whole career for like 20 years. So I'm not on the PR team, but I know how to do PR for companies. And so I had, I'm like, yeah, Danny, come have lunch with me. So I had lunch with him, and a PR person like walked by who like knew us and like said hi and stuff. And then later on, I got an email from them, and they brought me into a meeting to shame me. And I'm like, hey guys, first of all, he's a personal friend of mine. Like I've known him since the early days of blogging.
I'm allowed to have friends.
I'm allowed to have a friend here at work, actually. And secondly, I'm not giving company secrets. Like, we're literally talking about analytics, which is my product. And long story short, Danny Sullivan now works at Google and is their like search liaison, and he's doing like international government relations for Google. So you're welcome, former Google team, for me selling Danny and working there. And however
you should get your referral bonus.
They actually wouldn't give me one for Danny or someone else. They're really like, they're very specific about like the first touch attribution. They're like, oh, we don't have documented this. I think I got one where they eventually gave me credit. But anyway, I still think you do the right thing and you wait to get fired. And honestly, like, the company should just fire you if they really don't trust you that much to have like a friend or something simple. And I think that it's just such a good way to live. I feel like I personally just would never want to be within a giant corporate machine where like I was having to do something where it felt wrong or I felt constrained. And I understand there are situations like you don't do things for ego reasons. I don't think I've ever done things for ego reasons anyway. Like I like doing the right thing. So anyway, let's talk a little bit about your Substack. So 8 months ago, you launched a Substack. I really liked the thesis of, and do you want to share like some of the big ideas that you're most excited to communicate with what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a Substack called Fandom of the Fans, and it's about basically the intersection of fandom and what we're seeing across our world, whether it be business, whether it be pop culture and all these things, because it's not a new thing, but it is obviously something that we're trying to tap into. And I think we're seeing it on just an infinitely bigger scale. So I talk about a lot of like current events, fandoms. What does that look like? I have a podcast that's coordinated with it, where people are basically talking about like what it is to be a fan. Because I find that you're most of the time you're seeing it from the other side. You're seeing it from the celebrity or like the specific subject matter of what the fandom is around, instead of the people who actually make up that fandom and why it's important to them, why they love it, why they're ravenous and feral about it. And so I break down a lot of those pieces, but I also talk about like some of the psychological pieces of it too. One of the pieces that I published that did really well was on third spaces. And so, or third places, depending on who you ask. But basically the idea that fandom is replacing a lot of third places for people because we've been priced out of it, where we don't have like all these parks where you can go or these coffee shops where you can hang out, or we do, but now the price of entry is significantly higher, or those places are being torn down for something else. Concerts used to be a fantastic third place, but Ticketmaster's destroyed that and made it just like significantly more difficult to be able to afford, but also even get the tickets in the first place. And so really looking at the emotionality behind fandom, what does that look like, how it's created, and how it plays such a huge role in what we're doing. Great case in point is the day that we're recording this, my entire internet, and I'm not a golf fan. I will vehemently, like, I can talk trash about basketball, football, soccer. Like, I got you. I can hold my own. Golf, I'm a complete noob. But Scotty Scheffler got arrested this morning on the way to the PGA, like round 2, and it is all over my feed. I'm like, do y'all all like golf? Like, what is happening? And so I even tweeted about it, and they're like, no, this transcends golf. That's why you're seeing it. And so things like that, you if you're not part of the fandom, you would not understand, like, well, why is this important? And so I had someone reach out to me. He's like, this is like Paul McCartney getting arrested on the way to the Ed Sullivan show. And I was like, damn, okay, I understand. That puts it in a way that I can completely get. And so there's these little marks of fandom around us that we are seeing really being really popular and really powerful. We're seeing entertainment focus on this, like Fallout, the TV show. If the game didn't have a strong fan base, that never would have been turned into a TV show, ever. Last of Us, same story. And so we're seeing all these things play out in a world where especially marketers are trying to figure out, how can I get someone to want to do something? How can I get someone to want to give me their money and be happy about it? Fandom is a really powerful lever.
What's your take on big media's just inability not to kind of take a great fandom and sort of milk it a little too far? And I think there's obvious examples: Star Wars, Marvel sequels, etc. Like, do you think that big companies, do you think they can be stewards of fandom in the right way, or are they eventually going to be like, we could just keep kind of milking this and exploit it, and aren't going to necessarily put in the love that, say the OG people behind whatever that piece of IP did?
I think that it's really difficult right now because media and entertainment as a whole has turned very corporate. So everything is based on revenue. So they are squeezing as long as they can squeeze, and they're not adapting throughout the process. And then instead of saying, well, maybe there's a problem here, they go after the fans to basically be like, well, it's your problem. Like, you don't understand, or you're this or you're that, and that's why you don't like it anymore. Instead of, which is literally my job, like making sure the customer's happy. And if they're not happy, listening to them and figuring out what do we need to do with that feedback in order to keep going. And so what you wind up having is you have media and entertainment turning into this machine more so than we've ever seen, where everything is based off of revenue. I mean, Zaslav, is what he's done with Warner Brothers, is a fantastic example of this. I mean, you're going to tell me that no one wanted to see a Roadrunner cartoon movie? You're going to tell me that to my face? Well, millennials, where all we have left is nostalgia. You're going to tell me that to my face that we don't want that movie. Okay, cool. That, and then coupled with turning on the fans, being mad at them, those consumers are having to realize that the only real power they have is with their wallet. So you're seeing more and more boycotts. You're seeing more and more negativity around certain things. And so what you've done is you've turned a really rabid fan base for good into a rabid fan base for bad, not realizing that there's something even worse than that, which is you're going to take people who absolutely loved you and were passionate and couldn't wait to buy everything into angry people. And then at some point, you're still not listening to them, and then they get quiet. And apathy is the enemy. And so, but that's the path they're really going on, and they don't realize it, or they realize it, but they're not willing to change.
I love it. You got me thinking of, I was a big fan of Magic the Gathering growing up. You're familiar with that card game, right?
Yep.
For listeners who live under a rock, it's basically like, imagine Dungeons and Dragons meets baseball cards. So there's like a collectible aspect and a playing aspect. And one thing that they did to destroy the fandom is they created this collectible situation, and then they reprinted a bunch of the old ones, fine, but then they kept making like these new series and these new games and these new abilities, and they kind of, it was a beautiful purist game, almost like poker or chess. And now it's like this, it almost feels similar to like the sprawling universe of superhero sequels where, they took a good thing and maybe made too much of it. And I think, I don't know how you stop a company from doing something like that, but I think, I think actually keeping the original founders or people really passionate about whatever that idea is or company or media, IP. And if you have those people involved, I think, have them in the room as sort of the advocates of what you're going to do next, because as you talk about, there's a lot of money to be made in having a great fandom that likes what you do. So it never makes sense to me when I see a fandom or a community upset at a company for doing something that, like, a lot of times you can even tell, not being a part of that fandom, that this seemed like a boneheaded move. And I think the motivation is always, we want more people involved.
It's scale.
But the problem with that is, as soon as you make it, you bland it. So it becomes more interesting for more people. And in a world of infinite choice, you can ruin it for that group that really cares about what you're doing. So 100%. I think that's like the danger, right?
Oh, 100%. It's scale at all costs. We want to make this for everybody. And so the people who loved it when it was originally there, it's almost like proto hipster. I liked it before it was cool. And then as soon as it gets cool, you're going to water it down for everybody. But what you've done is you've done scale at all cost. So yes, you have a wider audience now, but the people who were hyper fixated on it and absolutely loved it, you've removed what made it so different and special and unique for them. And so now they've lost it. And then instead of working with them to maybe be like, how can we keep what was pure about this and still kind of expand it or find new ways for it to grow, you make them the villain for them wanting to hold tight to something that they absolutely loved. And so it's scale at all costs. And I think that goes to the corporatization of it. And like, I think a really great example of someone who is, or not someone, but a company that is vehemently going against that is A24. A24 is my absolute favorite studio. I love that they lean into their specific aesthetic, the kind of movies they have. Like, I can see a movie trailer and know that it's an A24 piece by the way that it's shot, by the aesthetics, by the kind of mood that they're trying to create with that. And they're leaning heavily into creativity and stories that like other studios would probably be fearful of. And so it's become this kind of like independent juggernaut because they've specifically done the opposite of what Zaslav is doing. They're like, we want to tell these stories. And it's not like we make a profit, amazing, but we can scale in our own way. And I think A24 is just like the perfect example of how to do this correctly. And I think is a model to mirror if you're a startup that's wanting to get into that like scale up place without ruining yourself in the process.
Yeah, I think one thing you would hope a lot of companies realize, even if they don't have a fandom, even if they just have a product people love, right?
Yeah.
Is that it's actually really hard to get the success that you've probably had. And as a marketer, I'm like intimately appreciative of that. And so, I think somewhat later stage marketers or CMOs come in with sort of harebrained ideas without doing enough research first. And I think it's kind of sad because you would think as a marketer, they would respect what's there. And it's actually pretty rare that any company succeeds in selling anything. And so I guess I don't really have a point with that other than I hope senior marketers take stock of the brand in the world and maybe even you mentioned sports, look back at the most popular sport franchises, right? Like look at the Bulls franchise in the 90s and like watch the Michael Jordan documentary, the ESPN Jordan documentary. It's on Netflix. It's so good. And like listen to all that they put into that franchise, not just into the team, but the fans. And it wasn't, you're mentioning everything about money. I think the really great brands and fandoms, it wasn't about money. And it turns out money is a great byproduct when you do things really well.
Exactly.
I just think it requires a different type of person. So that was going to be my next question for you. Yeah. You're one of the genuinely passionate people in our sector. There's a lot of people in our sector.
Other people say like opinionated.
No, opinionated and passionate are the same thing. And I don't say this lightly. I think for a lot of people, they're just ticking a box, especially when you see like the recent Apple ad. Come on, guys, you have infinite money and you're going to have metaphors showing technology destroying, analog instruments.
That was the most like can I tell you the tweet I wanted to tweet that I did not when I saw that?
Sure.
It was like RIP Steve Jobs, you would have hated this ad.
Well, it was a perfect bookend to the 1984 ad because what was that? They were blowing up a monochromatic screen. And what was this one? We were crushing creativity down into a monochromatic screen. So it was like a perfect unintentional bookend of the 1984
ad. It was Steve Jobs is literally not in the building. I can
Unbelievable.
Watch this.
Someone else had a funny tweet and they said, we need to harness Steve Jobs' energy of spinning in his grave to power the world from this ad, which is pretty funny. Terrible, a little more of a joke, but
morbid, but true. I'm sure somewhere he's haunting that entire creative team.
So if I am, and there are certainly, super creative, really great leaders, how do I find and maybe more importantly, retain someone like yourself at any level? Like, can you go back into your career and think of the things that were really positive that companies did that you liked and, others could learn from?
Yeah. Probably the one thing that every single job that I was ever a part of that became kind of like the pattern for me was I would always get brought in for brainstorms. So it'd be like, we need ideas. We need Christina in the room because Christina will just like blurt out things and we can like take some of those things. So that was always really helpful. But I think it comes down to you need to know what motivates people. And some people, they want impact. Some people, they want money. Some people, they want acclaim. Some people, they want growth, or they want to have more like table stakes within the company, whatever that looks like for them. But honestly, I think social exists for the main purpose that people want to be seen and heard. And so bare minimum, you need to make your employees that you want to keep feel seen and heard. Like if we didn't have that need, social would be irrelevant. There'd be no need for you to go on Twitter and talk into the ether because you don't need to feel seen or heard. But we do. We instinctively want to feel not alone, and that what we are saying and thinking is either not a singular experience, or that other people agree with us, which validates our experience, or makes us feel good about ourselves because they think we're funny, or they think that we're sweet, or they think that we're cute, or they think that we're brilliant, or whatever that looks like. But it all comes down to that like really core need to feel seen and heard. And that's the times that I always felt the best, is when I would have leadership listen to me and be like, that's actually a really good idea. I love that. Or thank you so much for doing that. That was really great work. And that goes such a really long way, and it doesn't cost you anything. And a lot of brands don't do that for their customers or for their employees.
Yeah, I think I may be privileged to be saying this, but I've not been at a company that I didn't feel heard and was like brought into pretty senior meetings, even from a young age. I'm very lucky. I think I was always with these, small quirky shops. Like I worked for Lee Odin, who at Top Rank, and a lot of other people in the industry. So I've been extraordinarily lucky there. So I'll agree with you for any leadership listening in. I think especially for junior people, because you can kind of feel like you never want your team to feel like a cog in a machine, or they're going to do the absolute minimum work. But if they feel like, look, I had a say in, this new campaign, or, the new website launch, or the new strategy, like I'm vested in that. And not just vested in it financially with equity like you are at a startup, but my idea and my knowledge is, my sort of point of view is part of this. And I think, especially on the creative side, I don't think that's necessarily true on the product and eng side. A lot of eng people, look, we're hired to, build the ship and make the engine go. But on the comm side, and it's really, you're hiring creative people. And to your point, it's like naive of us to pretend like creative people don't have ego.
Oh, they totally do. And I would challenge people, if you have an ad that's going up for Cannes, stop sending your C-suite and send the team that actually made the work.
Totally.
Challenge. It made me so mad when I went. I had friends that were in New York just sitting. I was there to talk, and on one of the boats on Yacht Row, and I kept seeing all these things, and I had friends who were working on the ads that were up for awards, and not a single one of them was in Cannes to actually get the award. Made me so angry. You want to keep your creatives? Let them be the ones that accept the awards, because they're the ones that did the work.
Yeah, as a performance marketing nerd for most of my career, I've never cared about winning an award. I think I submitted one once because my employer wanted a link from it. Yeah. We didn't care about the award. You just wanted a link from the award.
Even to be asked, like, this is up for this. We really love your work. We were going to send our CMO, but we'd also love some of the members of the team. Is anyone interested? That's a once in a lifetime opportunity. And that really shows how much you appreciate them.
Oh yeah, I agree. It's all about sending the actual team. It's not about the executive's ego. I think that's a big red flag. That might even be something for young marketers to do diligence of seeing who's actually going to awards. Is it the team, or is it?
I think that's a huge red flag. That will tell you, am I going to get credit for this, or am I going to do the work and then create a deck to prep the person who did not do a single minute of work on this, so they have enough context so they can accept the award. That's wild to me, and I know people who've been in that situation, and it's disrespectful.
100%. Well, Christina, this has been great getting to hear your journey, your perspectives on the industry, a bit about Fandom. Tell our listeners where they can connect with you, and we'll also drop some links, but where should they go to connect, and where should they go to talk to you if they need consulting help?
Absolutely. So you can find me on Twitter. Adam can attest, I basically live there. It's that Christina G. You can find me there, and on LinkedIn, just search Christina Garnett and I'll pop up. And then if you're interested in talking or learning more about what I do, you can go to pocketcco.com.
Awesome. And we'll throw some links in the episode description. Thank you everyone for listening. I am still doing the YouTuber thing. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you are watching this on YouTube. If you're just listening on your podcast app of choice, give us a share to your friends and followers if you found this useful. And we will see you back next week.